Adam, Splendid Sports, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Dave.
Good. So I was telling my listeners that you had this tremendous episode that was right in my wheelhouse. It was about how you were narrowing your focus on certain things and aiming for these really high goals that you wanted to achieve with certain players and certain collections. But it was a really quick episode, and I just wanted to know so much more. And it was essentially, we'll come back and we'll touch on them one by one, but it's your Mickey Mantle run, your turn back the clock matches with the vintage, with the 87 top set, your late 90s, mid 90s Pedro Martinez collection, and your Tom Brady base rookies. That's quite a bit, so we'll kind of get into it, but kind of provide a little recap or a roundup first of what that episode was and why you felt it was important or key to share your collecting goals.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate you listening and reaching out. It was kind of a spur of the moment thing. I was just driving home, and I had about 15 minutes till I got home, and I don't have as much time as I would like to have to do the podcast and my YouTube channel, but so I try to fit it in where I can, and that was just an opportunity. It was something on my mind where I just wanted to kind of talk for a little bit about not only the different goals that I have, but also the different eras, because I'm someone who likes to collect really all the different eras. I have cards from every era of the hobby, and I would say I'm primarily a player collector, but yeah, it was just a good opportunity to kind of just really for me, just kind of review the major goals that I have in the hobby right now. And yeah, like you said, I didn't talk much about each one, but it was just kind of like a Cliff Notes type thing on each thing.
I imagine that it might have been beneficial to you as well. I think it's important to remind ourselves sometimes to speak into existence what our goals are.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Because I'm somebody who needs to have focus in the hobby. I tend to like too many things, and I could go down too many paths. So I have to create rules for myself. I think you said I heard one of your episodes that you do 4. You limit yourself to 4 per player. Right? Yeah,
correct. Yeah, no more than four cards per player.
I do the same thing with. I have like 4 major collections of players that I don't limit myself on, but the other players that vintage guys like Stan Musial, Ted Williams, Willie Mays, Roberto Clemente, those guys that I have to have cards of those guys in my collection, but I had to limit myself to just 4 because it was just, if you don't, next thing you know, I'm going to try to make their whole run. I can't do that.
And it can get out of hand.
Yeah.
It can get out of hand, and then you can't collect the other players who you want to. And then so there's a methodology behind it.
Exactly. Yeah, you got to draw the line somewhere. So it's funny because I settled on 4 as well.
That's great. So the first one that I want to talk about is your Mickey Mantle run. And to recap real quick for listeners, you made the decision to go after his entire run of mainstream playing days cards. The big challenge, as you noted in your episode, was 51 Bowman and 52 Tops. You could put that off forever. Tell us about the moment when you decided, you know what? It's time. If I'm going to do this run, I'm going to do this run. How did you go about deciding to go after the big mantles so you could complete this goal of yours?
Yeah. So when it originally started like 12 years back, and I wasn't like in the hobby per se. I didn't know anybody. I was just collecting in a vacuum like many of us did. And I just wanted to get a couple Mickey Mantle vintage cards. It started with, I wanted to get like 2 of the cards that my dad had when he was a kid that got thrown out or given away or whatever. And it was the 55 Bowman and the 56 Tops. So I figured like, all right, I'll just get those, and that will scratch the itch. And, then next thing you know, I'm going for the 58 All-Star card. And I'm just like, I'll just get the ones that I really love. And then here, I don't know what it was, maybe 2 years ago, I just had the moment. I'm like, look, I could make this whole run because really there's 2 real big ones, real big ones. So I'm thinking, I got a lot of other cards, and I was kind of adding it up in my head and thinking, if I sold a lot of these cards, it's not going to pay for these cards, but it's going to put a big dent, and it could be doable. So I started like adding it up, and and calculating some things. And I just said, I'm just going to go for it, because with both of those cards, and especially the 52 tops, the other thing that was in my head was like, I could always get my money back out of this card. I feel, as long as I'm not paying something crazy as an entry point. If I ever have to sell them, I hope I don't, but if I ever have to sell, I feel very confident that in the future I'll be able to get at least close to what I paid for it. So there was a sense of that, like, who knows? Maybe I won't always have these two, but if I buy them, I'll at least say I could have completed the run, and it'll be an achievement. And I still have them. I haven't sold them yet, but those are cards that if I had to, I would, if I needed money for the family or anything like that. So,
What is the grade and grading company of the mantle, of the 52 mantle?
52 is a 1.5
In a SGC?
PSA.
PSA. Great.
PSA 1.5.
So as you were, and that's been a couple of years, you said, since you started doing that.
Yep.
Right. So when you were going through your collection, deciding what to keep, what you didn't want to sell, and what you were going to sell to help raise the funds for these cards, the 52, the 51 Bowman, was that a hard decision? Because our cards are like our babies in a way.
Mm-hmm.
What was the process like of pruning your collection and weeding out what you were willing to let go?
It was tough because I had never sold a card in my entire life until 2021. Never, not one, not even. I made trades when I was a kid and stuff, but I had never sold anything. Just always bought, never sold. I didn't even know how to sell, so I had to figure all that out. But yeah, it was very tough, and I made a big sale in real early on. I made a big sale of a. This is a whole other probably story that we won't have to go into, but I sold a Larry Bird card that I got for hundreds of dollars, and it ended up being worth. I ended up selling it for close to $30,000, and it was just a 1981 Larry Bird Topps card, first solo card in a PSA 10 that I had bought for I think it was $800 back in like 2016. So that was a big sale that I had some funds from that. I had some profit to play with, so that helped. But also, I had a lot of cards of like Stan Musial, Ted Williams, Clemente, Willie Mays, guys like that, Hank Aaron, that at one time, they were much cheaper when I was buying them, but I was thinking, hey, maybe I'll make their run, and then I decided, look, I can only, if I'm going to make a full run of Mantle, I can't do that other stuff. So I limited myself to 4, and that's where I sold a lot of really nice, Stan Musial, 1952 Bowman, and a PSA 8, so I had a lot of really valuable cards that I was able to sell. It wasn't easy to do, but it's weird because I don't really miss them. I have cards of theirs, so I scratch the itch, but I'm happy I made that move.
And so do you still have at least a Musial, a Clemente, and Aaron in your collection?
Yeah, I have this pretty cool. I got this binder, and I found they got these pages on Ultra Pro where you can put 4 PSA slabs per page.
I know I have some, and they're not filled yet, but I have those exact ones at home.
Yeah, so it was perfect. So I said, I'm going to limit myself to like 4 Musial cards, 4 Clemente cards, the guys that I want to have. And I'm just going to fill these pages. When the page is full, I'm done. I can't get any more unless I sell one and change my mind on what my favorite 4 are. A lot of the ones that I picked as my favorites were, cards that aren't that expensive. Could be a 65 Clemente, but I just love it, or, for the look of it. It might be the one I have could be like a PSA 4 that's $100 or something. So they're not real expensive, but at least I have them in my collection and good examples of them. So it made me feel good to at least still have some cards of those guys.
When you acquired the last Mantle and the run was complete, did you ever have them all in one place? Did you ever lay them out and look at the run as one entire body?
Yeah, I did. If you go to my YouTube channel, I think it's on my Instagram too. If you go to Splendid Sports on YouTube or Instagram, I've done a couple different videos on my Mantle run. So you could, I show them all together. I did a recent video too where I showed a bunch of Mantles too on like a tabletop. So yeah, if you go to my YouTube, you'll see the videos I did of that where you can see them all.
How did that feel once that was accomplished?
It felt, yeah, like a lot of people say, it feels great, but also like, I'm not done collecting Mickey Mantle, but at least with that I am. So, and I'm not someone who's going to like try to upgrade the grades or anything, because with vintage cards, especially, I don't really care. I don't care about the grades at all with vintage cards. I just want to go for ones that I think look good, whether it's a 2 or a 4. I don't care at all. So the lower the better. So I'm not ever going to try to upgrade grades or anything. I'm just, yeah, I guess I'm done with that portion of it. So there is a sense of like, wow, that was great, but like we always say, what's next? What's next after this? What
What's
am I
next? And were you chasing the chase, or were you chasing the completed chase? Right.
Yeah, yeah. That's why I like your podcast so much, is because it's about the hobby, it's about cards, but it's also like psychology. You talk a lot about why we do things, and I really love that part of it. So because I need help with that. That's one of the reasons I came on with a podcast and YouTube, is to talk with other collectors to try to figure out what's going on in my own head.
Yeah, motivation is just so important, and what drives us. And I think, and I think I do a lot of it just because I'm so twisted inside my own head. I'm going to jump up to the next one now, which is, so in 1987, I remember this well because that was during my first collecting run. But in '87, Topps put out a series of Turn Back the Clock cards, in which they featured previous cards, vintage cards, reprinted sort of in a smaller, within that wood grain border of the '87 Topps card, of older Clemente cards and Musial and many others. So your goal was to collect those '87 versions that honored the original vintage versions in PSA 10s, but also then collect the original versions to pair with it, right?
Yes.
How did you? That is one of the most unique ambitions I've heard of, and I love it. How did you arrive at that?
Well, when I was a kid, I always loved those cards. I always really loved those Turn Back the Clock cards, and it developed an appreciation for the vintage cards when I was a kid, like in the 80s. I would see that, 87 Clemente Turn Back the Clock with the 72 awesome Clemente card where he's tossing the ball up in the air. And I would just be amazed at that card. It felt like I would never have the original. I don't even know where I would get the original. It's just so cool. So that's one of the reasons I love vintage cards to this day, is those Turn Back the Clock cards. And so I had the love as a kid. And then, I would say it was probably about 2 or 3 years ago. I just started on YouTube, and I started talking about the Turn Back the Clock cards, and most people don't care about them. But my buddy Double D Vintage Baseball Cards, Dylan, he's got a great YouTube channel, and we do a show called Turn Back the Clock, which we named after the cards that kind of connected us. He left me a comment saying, I love those cards, and I actually found someone who had the appreciation for them like I did. And we said, let's do a show and we'll name it Turn Back the Clock. And then our first episode of Turn Back the Clock, we actually go through the history of all the cards. It actually started, Topps did a 1977. There wasn't card on card, but it was like a Turn Back the Clock of Carl Yastrzemski, and it kind of turned back to like the past. It told something about it. But the first card on card was actually 1986. 86 Topps has Turn Back the Clock card on cards. It's got like a Willie Mays one, some other ones too. But yeah, and then 87 all the way to 90, they did them. So I thought, it'd be really cool to get high grade of the the junk wax era Turn Back the Clock, and then pair it next to the original. So I've probably gotten like maybe 40% of them now. And originally it was like, I'll just get the ones that I really love, like the players like Koufax and Stan Musial. And now here I am going, all right, you know what? I'm going to try to get the whole run. So that's kind of how it goes with a couple things for me.
That's great. And if you're listening to this, you heard Adam mention his friend and broadcast partner, Dylan. Dylan's passion and enthusiasm just literally oozes through the airwaves. He is such an excitable character who enjoys vintage mostly, but also with all sports cards. And if you're tired of the same old podcasts and YouTube channels that talk about just the news of the day and flipping and whatever else, lock into Adam and Dylan, because it takes you back to why you collect cards in the first place.
Yeah, Dylan has one of the coolest card rooms. If you go on YouTube and you check out his videos, he built his own custom like museum. He lives in Hawaii, and he's a huge surfer, and he's just a great guy. And you got to see his card room. He has museum grade glass. He has his vintage cards displayed, and he does modern too, but he's strictly baseball cards for the most part. But you got to see it. I can't really explain it other than when you see it, you'll be amazed at what he's got going on there.
That's great. Okay, so of the four that we're talking about today, we've gone through two. There were two that really piqued my attention the most. The first was your mantle run, because I've talked before about I have one Grail card. My one Grail card is the 48 Leaf Jackie Robinson. I would have to basically trade my entire collection to get close. And so I was really wanting to pick your brain to see where you were and how you got to the mantle. So that makes sense. The whole selling, that 81 PSA 10 Larry Bird didn't hurt either that you brought up. The other one is your late 90s cards of Pedro Martinez. A fascinating era of card creation. The junk wax era was over. There was this creative boom going on in the hobby, and I have started to put together some cards of Mark McGwire and Barry Bonds from this era. Star rubies and the essential credentials are they're out of my reach, but things like the 98 atomic refractors, the ones that are out of 100, even the 93 refractors, the first refractor set, are just beautiful cards that I hope to add. Pedro defies expectations in that pitchers don't cost a lot of money, but there's something about Pedro Martinez that people still gravitate toward, where he goes beyond this thing of, well, don't collect Justin Verlander, don't collect Clayton Kershaw, don't collect Dontrell Willis. It doesn't matter. They all get hurt. They all go away. There's no value. Pedro has value. Which cards specifically are you looking at for Pedro? Kind of like what sets, what types? Are you looking for serial numbers, whatnot? And how did you land on Pedro as your choice?
Yeah, so I'll answer that first. So Pedro, I grew up, I live in Arizona now, but I'm originally from New England. So huge Red Sox fan, and Pedro was my favorite player during that period when I was there. And, when they won the World Series in 2004, and even before that, when the Yankees kept beating us every year. But yeah, he was my guy. I never didn't think to really heavily collect him until maybe a couple years back. And I had a couple of his cards from like the junk wax era, because that was my first thought, is like, yeah, his rookie cards, I love them, but yeah, there's so many of them. And but then I'd always been fascinated with that era, the 90s, mid to late 90s. And I would see, I would watch people's channels or podcasts when they talk about collecting basketball or football during that era, even a little baseball. But, I was always like, it's too, I don't want to spend all that money on cards. But then, yeah, when you combine Pedro, he is a pitcher. So those type of cards that I'm going after, like precious metal gems, essential credentials, star rubies, atomic refractors. So I was kind of targeting, serial numbered for the most part, rare, hard to find. I wanted to have a challenge. But, he's not as expensive. He's expensive, but he's not as expensive as like some of the guys from that era, like Derek Jeter, Ken Griffey Jr., Barry Bonds, positional players that now their cards are like pretty expensive, real expensive. But Pedro still, if you can find them, you can get some deals. It's not like out of the realm yet. So I figured I'll focus in on him, and I made like a list of 25. I could probably go to 45 at least, his number, if I wanted to. But I made a list of like those top chased after cards, and I thought, hey, let's see how many I can get. So I've been doing pretty well so far.
I know some of those cards are hard to find. In addition to being hard to locate, is there a base of Pedro collectors? Is it a competitive chase? Are there others trying to find those as well?
Yeah, it's funny. I was just messaging with one of them today that I think he's gonna come on my channel and podcast and talk about Pedro, because that's the thing with this era. If you're chasing these cards that there's 24 of or 50 of maybe, or some of them have 100, which for this era isn't a lot at all. It's still hard to find if it's 100 or less. There's so much demand, even if the player's not like a Derek Jeter or Ken Griffey Jr. There's a lot of people that just go after the set. So there's demand with that too. But yeah, it doesn't take a lot of serious collectors of a player that want to get that player's best cards to drive up the price. So yes, on Instagram, I know at least like 3 or 4 other collectors that chase after the same cards. And one of them sent me a message today saying like, hey, I love your love your cards that you're showing on your account, and even though you're adding competition, that's the way you put it. Because a lot of times some of these cards, until recently, this is a kind of a side note, but I had planned like, oh, maybe one of these cards will pop up every 6 months or something like that. It just so happened that probably the greatest Pedro Martinez collector passed away last year, and no one knew what he had, but it turned out he had multiple of these like Grail chase cards, and they're being sold now. His collection's being sold. A lot of it's not public, but a lot of it's kind of through social media and stuff. So there's more Pedros coming out now because this one collector had so many of them. So very interesting.
How did you find out about this collection becoming available?
It just happened. A guy that I would buy cards that sold Pedro cards off of eBay. I just kind of we struck up a conversation out on Instagram. Kind of moved from eBay to Instagram, and I just kept in touch with him. And I just said, like, if you ever come across any more Pedros, let me know. And I started texting with him here and there. Lo and behold, then he sends me the text that he's going to see this collection because the gentleman passed away, unfortunately. And he was an older gentleman, and his wife didn't know how to sell cards or anything, doesn't have PayPal accounts or anything like that. So he was helping the family sell the collection. And through that, I was able to buy a lot of the cards, which it's awesome because not only that I got those cards, but who they came from, that type of collection. Obviously, the circumstances are not what you want, but at some point, all of our cards are going to go somewhere else. And to get not just the cards I was chasing, but to get them from a collector like that, it means a lot.
It does. And obviously you wish people good health, long lives, that sort of a thing. But if you are acquiring a card from a collector, for someone like that, that it comes from a place of appreciation, and as opposed to this just happened to pop up on eBay at the right moment.
Right.
All right. So moving on to the last one is you're trying to collect all 44 Tom Brady base card rookies.
Yeah. How's that going? Well, I got 10 so far. And Tom Brady, again, being from New England, makes sense as to, why I would want to collect him. I wish I started sooner. I wish I was always a fan. I watched all the games and everything. I just never thought to really buy his cards. I don't know why. I had a few, but anyway, so I've been buying a lot of Tom Brady cards, and there's so many to choose from. The hard part with him is like, well, what lane do I go down here? I'm not going to get all his cards. There's no way. It's not possible. You can't have all that money to buy all his cards. But I finally figured, I love Pacific cards, and I really appreciate, like, I have Pedro Martinez Pacific cards. I'm a big fan of that company and the cards they put out. And Tom Brady has a lot of Pacific rookie cards. So I was like, yeah, and they're not as chased after. Some, Pacific's kind of, you either love it or you don't really care about it. And so I figured that would be a way to go. I'm not going to go after like parallels or any of the real expensive ones. And there's a checklist on the PSA website for the Tom Brady rookie card list. So I kind of did my research and thought, I could get all these. A lot of them are serial number, but a lot of them are serial number to like 1,000. There's obviously a few big ones like the Contenders. Now the Contenders rookie that you hear about that sells for hundreds of thousands of dollars, that's the championship ticket one. That's a number to 100. It's a parallel. There's a base Tom Brady rookie. It's still got an autograph on it, but they made thousands of those. So and that, I think it's going to continue to come down in price, which is good. So that will be obviously the biggest one, and hopefully the price will continue to come down, and I'll wait on that one that will maybe be like the last one I get, because that's by far the most expensive of his rookies. But you can get it. They're always for sale. It's not a rare card.
Would you say that you are generally a patient person? How are you not just trying to complete this task as quickly as possible? How do you space and pace this out so that you don't break your budget?
Yeah, it's funny. I when you asked that question, for some reason I thought I've been to one psychic in my life, and she was really good. Whether you believe in that stuff or not, one of the things that's always stuck with me, and my wife says it's true, is I am patient with other people, but not myself. So I thought that she said that to me, and at the time I was like, I don't really know what that means, but it makes sense now. I'm not a very patient person with myself and collecting. I try to move too fast, and that's something that I'm always trying to work on, is to take it as a lifelong hobby. I don't need, the card will come up again. Even the rare ones, they'll pop up. And some of the rare Pedro ones that I was like, I gotta get, oh, this, I may never see this card again. I've seen it come up again since I bought it. Even in the ones that are like there's 24 of and stuff, that they come up. So you get, yes, buy it if you can when it's available, but I think I just need to focus on making it a lifelong hobby for the rest of my life. I don't need to go too fast here. I keep telling myself that.
Yeah. So if you're talking to someone who is, establishing their own hobby goals, what advice would you have for them about searching and knowing when to jump, when to pull back, be patient, not be patient? How would you consult?
Yeah, I mean, well, everyone's got a budget, so figure out your budget, whatever it is. Stick to that. Don't go over your budget. And yeah, I think look at it as a long-term thing. If you're collecting, and you look at it like, I'm going to do this for as long as I can, I don't plan on getting out of the hobby and selling all my stuff, then you'll have time. And most of the cards, unless they're a one of one, they'll probably come up again. And even if it is a one of one and it sells, they'll probably sell it at some point. So you'll be able to get the card again. So I think it's just make your own, like I've tried to do, make your own lane, make your own checklist. Even if it's not the checklist that PSA has on their website, it doesn't matter. Make your own checklist. If you're going to collect a player, figure out a little lane within that player's cards, and maybe one that's achievable. That's what I try to focus on, is like, if you look at some of the sets on like the PSA registry, I look at it and I'll say, there's no way that no one's ever completed these. And I will never complete this in my life. If I had 10 lifetimes, I'd never complete this checklist. So that stuff doesn't really appeal to me. Even if I don't complete it, I want to at least try something that at some point I'd have a chance at completing.
Well, Adam, this has been great, and thank you for sharing. I speak personally, but I think I speak for others as well, when it can be frustrating to know where you want to go, but not know how to get there. So I think this last half hour or so has been really helpful to some of us who can now hear from someone who is taking the steps to reach those goals. So thank you so much.
Appreciate you having me, and I'd love to have you on my podcast and channel sometime if you'd ever be interested. Love to have you on with even me and Dylan. Would love to have you on sometime. So thank you.
Anytime, just say the word. I'll be there. And one last thing, why don't you just tell everybody your social media handles once more?
Oh yeah, just Splendid Sports, Instagram, YouTube, out there on all the places. Just Splendid Sports. That's me.
Adam, thanks. Take care.
All right, Dave. Thank you.